bit less of a teachy type video. This is more like yeah, just kind of sharing my experience, really, talking about some stuff, ongoing stuff that I've been dealing with as part of my recovery, part of my life, really. Anyway, rather than spend ages justifying it, I'm just going to talk about it. When I first got clean, I was using a particular model of recovery. I was working a 12-step program. I was attending meetings regularly. I was doing service. I was doing step work, and I had a sponsor, and I was involved in sponsorship. Now, if anyone's got any awareness of 12-step programs, those are like, I suppose, supporting pillars of very large. I used to hear it said that if you're doing those 4 things, step work, sponsorship, service and meetings, you're working a program, you are doing the 4 suggested things, they were called. And I did those things. After I bought into the hope and belief that I could get clean and stay clean, I bought into that, and I applied myself quite doggedly to following that program, and it certainly helped me. I stayed clean. Without the 12-step program, I don't think I would have stayed clean in the early days. It provided me, unless that I found something else that provided me with the stuff that the 12-step program provided me. It provided me a means of looking at myself. It provided me with a peer group of people who were interested in getting clean, helping others, bettering themselves, and becoming productive members of society. So if I want to better myself and be a productive member of society, then really the best peer group I can have is people who are of a similar ilk. And I know the 12-step program provided me a level of acceptance, regardless of my past and my my shortfalls. I guess there was acceptance there, something that I'd desperately sought my whole life. I just wanted to belong to something. And this video isn't slagging off the 12-step program, like I say, although there are good and not so good things about it. That's not what this video was about. So I applied the 12-step program as best I felt able, and it helped me improve my life. It helped me stay clean. One of the things that I used to hear a lot was, I used to hear people say, "Oh, your head starts to level out when you get to 1 year clean." And then I got to 1 year clean and I still felt a bit nuts. What it then seemed to be was, when you get to 2 years clean, your head starts to level out a bit. You start to settle down a little bit emotionally and what have you. And when I got to 2 years clean, what I heard was, when you get to 5 years clean, your head starts to settle down a little bit and your life starts to fall in place. No joke, that was kind of how it felt. It felt like the goalposts were being moved every time I reached a time when I was going to feel sane, well, happy, whatever it was. It then seemed to be that people said it was in the future. So anyway, I've had enduring anxiety issues, and I've had enduring low self-esteem, insecurity issues. I've had enduring issues of being extremely self-critical, giving myself a hard time, And so I was about 5 years clean, there or thereabouts. It doesn't matter specifically. I was about 5 years clean, and I felt like I still wasn't well, in inverted commas. And I say inverted commas because one of the things that you're around in the 12-step program is people talking about illness versus wellness. You know, dodgy behaviour, acting out, sleeping around, gambling a lot, talking about people behind other people's backs, being selfish and self-centred. Those people are considered ill. Well people are considered people who do lots of service, are selfless, so on and so forth. And I felt ill. If you use that measure, which I'm not so keen on, but I didn't feel like I had attained the levels of peace, serenity, confidence that other people around me were talking about. I felt ill. And my first thought about that was you're not working your program hard enough. You need to do more. You need to go to more meetings. You need to help more newcomers. You need to do more step work. You need to be more open and honest with your sponsor, and you need to do more. That's why you don't feel good. That's why you still have enduring anxiety issues. That's why you struggle. You're not working hard enough. Work harder. I asked somebody else to take me through the 12-step program again. Do the written work, as it were, the 12-step of the 12-step program. I did that, and I didn't feel much better, to be honest. I felt a little bit better, and I got a bit more I was a little more honest about some stuff that I'd perhaps neglected to discuss in previous step work. But I still struggled, What the enduring anxiety issues I talk about, not always, but I spend quite a lot of time in this alerted adrenaline state, feeling like I'm going to be attacked, feeling like people are going to try and hurt me, feeling like I might be assaulted, or fear of conflict. And I thought to myself, that's because I'm not in inverted commas again well. I thought maybe I'm not working my program hard enough. I later learned that state is called hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is being on, and I experienced that during my using to a degree. When I was trying to obtain drugs, when I was trying to obtain money for drugs, and not heavily under the influence, I used to really struggle with going outside, being in groups and crowds of people, loud noises around me, the sound of conflict around me, shouting, raised voices, boisterous behaviour. It all used to frighten me. So much so that when I used to have to go out to steal and get money, I used to have to kind of talk myself into. I didn't want to go outside, and I was frightened to go outside, and I was frightened to interact with other people, but I also needed money for heroin and crack and the rest of it. And I used to have to kind of force myself to go outside, to graft, to steal, to get these things. And I remember once kind of using a bizarre kind of strategy and kind of convincing myself that I was like RoboCop, in that RoboCop had, if you know the films, he used to look at stuff and he would assess threat within a matter of seconds. He would look at a person, identify whether they had a weapon, identify whether they were behaving in an aggressive or threatening manner. And I used to kind of set myself up to work like that, to go outside, go into like a Robocop mode, feeling, highly anxious and adrenal, I guess. Yeah, and I later learned that was hypervigilance. It's called hypervigilance, and I felt like that a lot of the time. Outwardly, the way that would look is well, for a start, I would avoid those things where possible. I would avoid going out. I would avoid large social situations. I would avoid those kind of environments. As well, one of the ways it would also appear is that when I felt, so if I was in a public place, so I used to go to college and university, and when I was in public areas in those places or on the way to and from those places, if I went into that adrenal state and felt threatened, I would then outwardly appear to be quite aggressive, and internally I would start to feel quite aggressive as well. I would stare at people for an inordinate amount of time. I would assess people as to whether I could beat them or whether I thought I could beat them if it became violent. And I got sick of feeling like that. I as I say, I was walking around thinking, I should be better now. I should feel better now. Why am I still so frightened? Why am I not good at managing my emotions? Why am I so self-critical and so insecure? So I sought other means to try and address that. I went to, I'd had counselling whilst I was at rehab, and I tried getting some more counselling again. And when I went to, so I approached an organisation locally that does counselling. You pay donations basically, and you get counselling, if you can afford a donation, that is. And I went to him anyway, and I had a counselling assessment, and the lady said to me, "Why is it you feel you need counselling?" And I talked to her about how I feel, how I felt, and I also talked to her about some of the physical and emotional abuse and borderline sexual abuse that I'd experienced as a child growing up. And in talking to her about that, she said to me that when I was describing the abuse, she asked me whether I'd reported it to the police, which I hadn't, and she said that I should report that. In talking to her, I told her about the perpetrator, and the perpetrator had moved on away from my family. He'd separated from my mum, and he'd moved in with another woman who had a child, and I was aware of that, and I told her that, and she said, the counsellor said, you need to report that in case it's happening to somebody else. And if you don't report it, then I may well be forced to. So I took steps to report it. I went to report it. Now that stuff about the abuse and the outcome of me reporting it, I am going to talk about in another video. Really this, though I don't want to digress too much away from this, kind of talking about me feeling somewhat inadequate or unwell as a result of having other stuff going on. I want to stay with that really. So I embarked on having counselling, and I also, as I say, got to a place where I reported those historical abuse crimes, and I also went to see my GP, and also alongside this, part of this process was through work. I went to like a veterans conference, and I'd thought during my recovery, do I have PTSD? And I'd wondered, but I had this perception of PTSD as being people who had visions type flashbacks. You know, they might be walking along and then all of a sudden they would see the scene played out of the incidents or the trauma, as it were, like it was on a TV screen in front of their eyes. And I didn't experience flashbacks in that sense. I didn't, my understanding of the flashbacks associated with PTSD wasn't right, particularly. And I also didn't have one specific traumatic event. I wasn't involved in a one-off explosive crisis type event. It was sustained over a long period of time. And so on one hand I thought, do I have PTSD? And on the other hand I thought to myself, well, no, I don't, because I don't have those vision type flashbacks, and mine wasn't a one-off instance. And I went to a veterans event when I was working with drug services, and there were several presentations given on PTSD there, and I learned that PTSD can be caused by prolonged exposure to threat situations and hostile environments, as it were, as opposed to one bomb blast type scenario or car crash type scenario. So I went to my GP anyway, and I started to ask questions of my GP and tell her a bit about my experiences and how I felt, and she referred me to the mental health team, and I saw a psychiatrist for an assessment. Now by this point as well, because I'd had this period of like not knowing what were wrong with me, or thinking that my problem was just untreated addiction, in inverted commas again, untreated addiction. I by the time I got to go and see a psychiatrist, I actually wanted a diagnosis. I wanted somebody to say, yes, Mr. Bradshaw, this is what's wrong with you. So I went there wanting a diagnosis, but I was diagnosed as having PTSD by this chap, which was a couple of years ago. In honesty, I'm not sure whether I buy into it. I'm not even sure 100% whether PTSD is actually a thing that I've got, whether it's a concrete thing. I worry sometimes that it might be a label that I've conveniently attached to myself that is perhaps harming in some way. But anyway, I was diagnosed with PTSD. The way they diagnosed it was he pulled some sort of book out, and he went through a list of symptoms, and if you ticked 4 or more boxes, then they considered you to have PTSD. My trust in the diagnosis was somewhat mitigated, because he also, I made comments about spending long periods of time in fantasy and some other stuff that I can't help but feel that everybody does, to be honest. But he also said to me, you also have traits of, I think it was schizoaffective personality disorder. I may be misremembering, but some form of personality disorder. He said, you may also have this. Do you want me to put it in the report? Like I was there to collect a few diagnoses, and so I said no. I said, I don't want you to put down that I have X, Y, and Z personality disorder. I did want the PTSD diagnosis. I wanted that because I viewed that as being a means for me to get treatment and feel better. I just wanted to feel better. I just wanted to not feel afraid. to feel like a good person. I embarked on some CBT. CBT being a hoop I had to jump through to get EMDR treatment, which is flashing lights and other mechanisms designed to help rewire or reconfigure your brain, and help with symptoms of PTSD. I never actually got to that point because I separated from my wife and my life got a little bit hectic. I was moving around a lot, so I just discontinued the CBT. And didn't even get to the stage where I did EMDR. Yeah, I don't particularly have a point. I guess if there's a point or there's something, a message that I'm trying to convey, or what I can pick out of that is sometimes we have other stuff wrong with us, or not. Yeah, sometimes we have other stuff that needs addressing. Sometimes it's not just that you're an untreated addict. Some of us have concurrent or some of us have concurrent mental health conditions. Some of us have baggage that need looking at. Some of us need additional help. And we shouldn't feel bad about that either. You shouldn't, I actually felt like less of a person at times when I was in meetings because I still felt unwell. Like I wasn't working hard enough, although I was trying my hardest, I was trying my best. I suppose one of the points, and I made this in meetings when I still used to attend meetings, which incidentally I don't anymore, but one of the points I made is, don't ask a bunch of drug addicts for fucking medical advice. If you want medical advice, go to a medical person. 12-step program really helped me, but it can't cure everything. It doesn't cure everything. So if it isn't working for you, if you are following a 12-step program, fair play to you. And if it's working for you, brilliant. But if there is other stuff where it isn't working, then seek alternative or appropriate help. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I am going to make a video about reporting the abuse and the outcome of all that stuff. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. If you'd like to, they're not all going to be like gloomy stuff as well. Today I had intended to tell an amusing anecdote about something that happened, something that I did, but anyway, if you want to see more stuff, you could either subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Rollo the Walker, Recovery Speaker, or you could follow my Facebook page of the same name, Rollo the Walker, Recovery Speaker, or you could email me if you wanted. People still email, I guess. My email address is HOPEFIEND, hopefiend @live.co.uk. Alright,